Okay, we're going to learn Be'ez Hashem Yisborach, a little bit of Likutei Sichos, Sicha and Parshas Miketz, the first Sicha. I'll learn a little bit more Be'ez, some to try to understand some ideas more deeper. So generally, see the structure of the basic Sicha, and then go a little bit more Ba'omek into the meaning of the Sicha. So the story, the Sicha bases itself on the Pisron of the Chalamis of Yoseph, that Yoseph was placed with the Chalamis. Yoseph interpreted the dreams of Pari. Pari has a dream, and the dream, he Sheva Paris about the seven lean cows and the 7 fat cows, and then the stalks of grain. So the interpretation of Yoseph is that the 7 cows, the 7 cows, represent the 7 cows, the healthy cows represent the 7 years of plenty. The 7 lean cows represent the 7 years of famine. Same also with the 7 stalks of grain. The 7 stalks of grain that were lean represent the years of famine, and the ones that were filled represents the years of plenty. This is the interpretation of the dream. So the question is, Yosef interprets the dream. Pari is very impressed by the interpretation of the dream. And so much is he impressed with the interpretation of the dream that he actually anoints Yosef to be the Mishnah Lamelech and the one that's going to be in charge of distributing the food that was gathered during the years of plenty for the years of famine. But the question is, I'll ask a few questions. First question is, how is it possible that none of the Chaturim Zion, none of the interpreters of the dreams of Pharaoh were able to interpret the dream that fat cows versus lean cows and healthy stalks of grain versus lean stalks of grain, that they represent years of plenty, years of famine? That seems to be the first instinct almost to understand the dream. That if you look at something that seems to be the same animal, and one dream appears to be healthy, and one dream seems to be the opposite of healthy, so obviously it has to do with, and cows and stalks of grain represent food, so then of course it means that there'll be years of plenty, years of famine. What is the great novelty of Yosef's interpretation that no one was able to interpret the dream like Yosef? This is the first question. What is the great wisdom that we find in Yosef? The second question is, after Yosef interprets the dream, Yosef actually adds, and it says, V'ata, and now, what you shall do, since you know that there's going to be the 7 years of famine, the 7 years following the 7 years of plenty, what you should do is you should establish a system, you should have someone in charge that collects enough grain, enough food in the years of plenty that will help us survive in the years of famine. So the question is, obviously, how does this part of the dream interpretation? It seems to be Yosef is suggesting something to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh says, I have a dream, and I need an interpretation of the dream. Yosef interprets the dream for the years of plenty and years of famine. Then Yosef adds, sort of mixing in to the rulership of Egypt, saying that, if you listen to me and if you do this correctly, you can actually prepare for the years of famine, for the years of plenty by gathering enough food for survival for the years of famine. But why does Yosef offer advice? First of all, it seems like he's only asked to give the interpretation of the dream, and this seems very ostentatious of Yosef. In fact, he's a lowly slave, and here he's talking to the Pharaoh, and actually offering him advice. So how does this understand? So this is also a question. The questions are really, what the Rebbe wants to understand is, because this is an obvious question, what is the greatness of Yosef's interpretation? These are the two basic questions. What's the greatness of Yosef's interpretation? It seems to be a very simple interpretation. And how does Yosef add advice when he's only asked to interpret the dream? Rashi doesn't ask this question. And the fact that Rashi doesn't ask this question means that somehow in the Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the little understanding of the Psukim, if you read the Psukim well enough, you don't actually need Rashi to tell you the answer. Just by reading the Psukim, you must say is that it's prepashtus, that it's, or that it's hinted in a Rashi, or that it's so simple in the reading of the Psukim and the verses that you can understand it. And then the Rebbe goes into explain a little bit of Rashi, and then goes to explain what Rashi brings down in the name of the Medrash, that the interpreters of Para's dream were actually able to interpret the dream. But they interpret the dream saying that 7 represents 7 healthy cows, represent the 7 children, healthy children you'll have, and represents the 7 unhealthy lean cows, represent that these 7 children will actually die. But the question is, why don't they think about the original, the simple interpretation of literally the pshat, that if it's a healthy cow, it represents, not metaphorically, they'll say that 7 is a number. So instead of saying 7 as years, you'll say 7 as a number of people, children. And years of plenty means you'll have them, they'll be healthy children, and years of the opposite. And lean cows represent the deaths of them. But if you think about it on a literal level, the literal level actually makes even more sense. That the seven cows that are healthy cows represents the 7 years that would be years of plenty, and the 7 lean cows represent the years that represents the years that would be famine. So why do they go to the allegorical interpretation of the dreams? So the Rebbe brings down our Barbanel. It says, because our Barbanel argues, it says, Barbanel is the last of the Chachmas Svard, one of the Rosh Svard, one of the great Jews that were expelled from Spain during the expulsion of Spain. 1492. So the Rabbanel says that the difference is that the Chatumim, the interpreters of the dreams, were using were trying to understand dreams the way, more or less the way a modern understanding of dreams. The dreams represent is a metaphor, it's something that's seen in an unclear vision. It's something that arises from within a person, and therefore they're interpreting the dream as a metaphor. So the lean cows and the fat cows represent the death of children, the birth of children. But they're not reading it kipshute, literally, that it actually means famine and years of plenty. And Yosef Atzad, because he has Ruach HaKodesh, he understands that it actually means literal. The Rebbe says this interpretation of the Barbanel is a beautiful interpretation, but it's not according to Pshat. We don't find anywhere in the Torah, on a Pshat level, on a literal level, that there's this distinction between these 2 types of dreams. Anyways, the Rebbe goes through all different ways of understanding these questions and offers a few different interpretations and then dismisses them. And this is something that we find throughout Likutei Sichos, something that's very unique in the Torah. That when the Rebbe wants to present an answer to a question, the first thing that is done is first to bring down all the possible interpretations that were offered up until this point, from all the Gedolei Harishonim, including some of the Bal Akeda and the Barbanel, some of the more philosophical interpretations from the Gedolei Harishonim, even from the later Rishonim, and from the Gedolei Achronim, certainly its interpretations of Rashi, to see if anyone touches upon these questions. And before the Chiddush is offered, before the Rebbe's Chiddush is offered, it's ensured that there's all the other interpretations were exhausted, and then there's going to be the Chiddush. So the Rebbe's Chiddush is like this. What the Rebbe's Mechalish is like this. This is what the second interpretation is. That the main problem of the dream, this understanding helps answer both questions simultaneously. Why they didn't think about it, and why Yosef not only thinks about it, but offers also advice of what should be done. Is that the pasuk talks about in the story where Pare is seeing the dream. It says, that he sees that there are 7 other cows. That there was healthy cows, and then he sees that there are 7 lean cows arising from the Nile. And the lean cows actually stood right next to the healthy cows, which means that they were simultaneously standing together. That means that it weren't in a sequence, the first one thing happened and then the second thing happened, but rather they were simultaneous. They were simultaneously things happening. Therefore, it's possible. That's why Rashi offers the interpretation of that you will have 7 children will die. It's possible that because Paro was a very powerful man in the ancient world, was married to many women, it's possible that he would have 7 children simultaneously that are born, and 7 children that will simultaneously pass away. And therefore, that's why Rashi offers that interpretation, because of Atam Itzel Paris, because it says that he stood next to it, it must mean that things were happening simultaneously. And that's the genius of Yosef. That when Yosef understands that the dream occurs, even though in the Pshat of the Sukkim, interestingly, the Rebbe brings down in Ara 42, it actually doesn't repeat itself. When Pare repeats the story to Yosef, it doesn't repeat this detail. But the Pashas means that he repeated everything, like the Ramban brings down, that Yosef sees these 2 things simultaneously and says that these 2 animals, the lean animals and the fat animals, that he's seeing simultaneously get together means the 7 actually means literal 7 in terms of 7 years. The fatter animals represent years of plenty. The leaner animals represent years of famine. And the reason why the lean animals are standing next to the healthy animals, they were standing together by the Nile, which is the Nile is the source of sustenance in the ancient world of Egypt, is because Yosef understood that there was a chibur, there was a unity between these 2 things. That even though they're in sequence 7 and then the next 7, first is the years of plenty, then is the years of famine, but Yosef understood that the reason why he's seeing them simultaneously is because he's supposed to draw a connection between them. What is the connection between them? If during the years of plenty, the people will gather food for the years of famine, that means that during the years of plenty, 7 years of plenty, they would sense, they will be present in their mind, the years of famine. Then during the years of famine, the years of plenty will be present because you'll have food to eat during the years of famine. And that's the chiddush which Yosef understands. Yosef understands that they're being shown that they're standing simultaneously so they can draw within each other. During the years of the famine, during the years of plenty, he should gather enough food for the years of the famine, so thinking about the famine. And there's a year of the famine, they'll have enough food that gathered from the years of the plenty. And that's actually why he says this, why he offers this advice. The advice is part of Vi'ata. And this is what you should do, he tells Pharaoh, that you shall anoint someone to be in charge of gathering enough food during the years of plenty for the years of famine. It's not an additional thing that he's adding. He's saying this is actually part of the dream interpretation. The reason why you're seeing those things simultaneously is because they're supposed to be together. You're supposed to gather during the years of plenty for the years of famine. And that's the chiddush of Yosef's interpretation. That answers the question, all the questions. It answers the question why Yosef gives an interpretation, why it's according to even Pshuta Shel Mikra, how is the answer, how you can see the answer, and it answers the question why they weren't thinking about it. They were thinking about a different context, and Yosef was able to understand it, the complete chibur between unity between these two ideas. This is the nigla part of the interpretation of the Sikha. And then the Rebbe continues of Pnimius. Then the Rebbe continues according to Pnimius. And according to Pnimius, the dreams of Parah is really the beginning of the Aschala, the beginning of the Golus Mitzrayim, because once Parah has the dream, then he establishes Yoseph to be his second in command. Once Yoseph is in second in command, he becomes someone that can offer sustenance to his brothers when he's during the years of famine and Eretz Yisrael, they can come to Mitzrayim. And therefore, that begins the Aschala of Eilu Shmois B'nai Yisrael Aboy Mitzrayim. This is the beginning of Klal Yisrael entering into Mitzrayim. So the beginning of Golus begins with these dreams. And that's the reason, and that's the reason that it's connected to the world of dream. Because dream, the Alter Rebbe explains, Alter Rebbe writes in Torah, that on Yinu Kachom, Meshul Hashem is saying that we're like dreamers, that Golus represents a state of dream. Why does Golus represent the state of dream? Because in a dream state, we can have two rapidly successive things almost simultaneously, contradictory things. Now, there's an aura in the Friedrich Rebbe's Mamorim that Rebbe writes that it's impossible to see a Pila Kupa de Machta. You can't see a paradox in a dream. You can't see an elephant walking through the head of a needle, because that's an impossibility. That's a minimum noise. If the elephant is the size of an elephant, the needle still remains the size of a needle pin, and the head of the needle, then it's impossible for the elephant. But you can see an elephant flying. You can see the needle expanding. You can see the elephant shrinking. You can imagine things that are normally not observed in a very different type of way. And therefore, in a dream, things can also move very quickly. Not only there could be opposite things, feelings. You can feel afraid. You can feel happy. It's very in quick succession. But you can actually go from one state to another state very quickly in a dream. That's what the Alter Rebbe explains. That's the idea of a dream state. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe talks us in terms of avodah, that a person davens, a person learns. And then, they have a gishmaka davening, a very intense davening. They feel really connected to Hashem. And then 5 minutes later, they feel stuck in the darkness of life and all the tears of parnasa and everything that's bothering them about their livelihood. And they feel like that they're not real. They're schizophrenic, or they're not true to themselves, because if the davening was really real, then during the day they should feel the effects of that. And Alter Rebbe says no. It's possible that your davening is very real if it is real when you're davening, and then 5 minutes later, it's possible that you're really going to have a lot of titus opanasa because your mood moves from one state to the next. So there's an idea of vatamoidna. This is on a deeper level. They're saying that Yosef sees the dream of Parah, because the dream of Parah is the beginning of the Golas and also eventually the beginning of the Gula. Because he sees the dream that way, he sees these two opposite things in that dream. That Parah sees it's all Paris, and Yosef was able to interpret this dream this way. He was able to see the hafachim, the opposite things that are simultaneously happening. Because the opposite things are starting to happen is the state of dream, which in fact is the state of Golus, the state of exile. Now, the simple reason why during a dream you can see hafachim is because the conscious brain is quiet. That's what happens in a person's dreams. The logical part of the brain, the systematic part of the brain that thinks in sequence, 1 + 2, 1 + 1 is 2, is quiet. So more the imaginary part of the brain, the koach madama, is now more awake, and because that's more awake, therefore a person can see things, contradictory things that are happening simultaneously. But the pneumistic reason, and this also continues over there, is that the pneumistic, the deeper reason for that is because the shoyrish of Galus comes from Bechinas Igulim. The shoyrish of Galus comes from a place called Eagle. Eagle means a circle. So there's something that's called a kav and the eagle. These are two anhagas, the two ways of Hashem connected to the world. One is cyclical and one is linear. In the cyclical world of eagle, which is a higher realm, where there's no sequence, where everything is simultaneous, in the world of Eagle, because the reason why Gullus is a like we're in a dream state. The superficialism is because our seichel is not so, our intelligence is not so strong. Therefore, only the koyach of Adam is more present, the power of imagination. But at a deeper level, it's because the koyach of Eagle is being revealed. Finally, the Rebbe connects this to the idea of Yoseph, that the reason why the interpreter of the dream was specifically Yoseph is because Yosef Shayrish on the Shama is connected to Olam HaGolim, the world of Eagle, and because Yosef Shayrish in Eagle, therefore he was able to combine these two opposites. So the Rebbe goes through a thread of an idea in the Sikha, first explaining on the level of the Pshat how this works. What was the chiddush of Yosef's interpretation? Why was Yosef? What was the chiddush of Yosef's interpretation? How come Yosef offers advice? And then the Rebbe goes up according to a more optimistic understanding is that the reason why Yosef was able to interpret the dream, to see the hafachim, which was the idea of Galus, is because the shayrish of Yosef is connected to the world of Eagle. And because the shayrish of Yosef is connected to the world of Eagle, that's Yosef's bechina. The bechina of Yosef is also Mitzvah Yisod, which is the idea of connection. Yosef was able to connect the hafachim. This is a deeper understanding of why Yosef was the person. In other words, to understand it al pim nigla, this is also the way the the Mahalach and Likutei Sichos is, to see the entire Torah as a chativa achas, as one mitzias, called Torah kul mitzias achas. Which means not only call Torah kul mitzias achas, not only is the entire Torah one mitzias. When you have a question and you want to understand something, you have to understand it according to the literal pshat. First, understand the oimik pshat, understand mamash on the pshat level, on the literal level, to decode it, to make sure you understand it on the pshat, and then to understand that the pshat level is a reflection of something that's going on a pneumistic level, on the soil level. And they're actually part of the one thing. That in order for us to understand the pshat of something, you have to understand the pneumius of it. In order to understand the pneumius, you have to also understand the pshat. You can't understand the pshat without the pneumius. You can't understand the literal without understanding the deeper, because the chativa achas is one mitzias, it's one existence, one Torah. And in order to understand the pneumius, we have to first establish what the pshat is, and they're always consistent. There's always a consistency. There's a teaching by the Maram Ipano, one of the great scholars of Italy, Talmud and Ramak from that school. And it's brought down many times. I just want to point one thing out, then we'll go to something that the Rebbe writes about this Maram Ipano. So Maram Ipano says, it's a Mamechika Din Chelik Gimel Perek Chuf Beis. There's a Sikha in Likutei Sichos Chelik Gimel Achar Hashuas. The Sikha with regards to the Fuas of Shas. Brings down this Maram Ipano. So let's just read what the Maram Ipano writes like this. The Maram Ipano writes, talking about the idea of the Torah, and he says that the Torah is the Torah shemedaberes be'etzem elyon. The Torah, in essence, speaks about the above. V'remezes b'shniyos b'tachton. And in essence, is talking about something that's above. And derech agav b'shniyos, in its secondary form, it's meramas. It's alluding to something that's talking about in tachtonim. So Torah medaberes be'elyonim, be'etzem elyon. Torah is talking about above, and is remez b'tachtonim, and it's alluding to below, which means that when you read the Torah, you read the Psukei Torah. Let's say we're learning the story now of Miketz, and there's a pare, and there's a Yoseph, and there's a dream. So the Rav Pinson is saying is that be'etzem really pare. We're talking about pare be'elyonim. Pyre, which represents a higher madrega, a spiritual realm, the way pyre exists within a spiritual realm. It says in Chassidus that pyre represents Isparin, the Chol Nahurin represents a very high light, a very high oil. Yoseph represents Olam Igulim, like we brought down, and a Cholim represents the world of Igulim. So it's talking about really the etzem. In its essence, it's talking about something that's above. And then it also becomes embodied within a character called Pare, a living being that lived in a certain time. He was called Pare. And there was a person called Yosef. So Be'etzem, it's talking about something that's spiritual, and it's a reflection, something that's in the physical world. And then the Ramban continues. Even though the Ramban writes differently. What does the Ramban write? The Ramban in the beginning of Bereshis writes that Akosiv Yidaber B'tachtoinim B'yimers B'elyonim. That the pasuk is really talking about Tachtoinim, the lower, and it's alluding to the Elyonim, the higher. So what it's actually talking about is Tachtoinim, the below. And the Remez, what it's alluding to, what it's hinting to, is something that's above. So the Ramban says that's the opposite of life. He says this is what the Ramban says. Because he says the Ramban is following the understanding of that the Torah is talking in the language of man, which means that the language of man is really what the Torah is talking about. It's it's talking about the lower, but it's alluding to something that's higher. The Ramban says no, it's the opposite. Dibru b'nei adam k'loshna Torah. Our speech is a reflection of divine speech, of the higher speech. The Torah's medaberes b'elyonim speaks about above and alludes to the below. In Likutei Sichos Chelik Chav Gimel, Shulas Gimel, never brings down this Maram. You do the Klab Chazal. It's known this principle in Chazal from our sages, and just the Maram Pan. A Torah medaberes be'etzem b'elyonim v'remezes b'shniv b'chtoinim. It's speaking about an essence above, and it's only alluding to the below. This is something that the Shalach Kaddish as well is Ma'arech. The Shalach Kaddish speaks about this a great line. And the Tziyun is also to look at the Torah of the Arizal, the beginning of Parshas Bereshis. He talks about that the Torah Bereshis Bar Lekim, this Beis, it's Torah's Habriya. That's the world of duality. Therefore, the Torah starts with the letter Beis. The Yerushalmi speaks about why the Gemara and the Chazal, Medrash brings down why is this Torah start with the letter Beis. So the Rizal says the deeper reason why the Torah starts with the letter Beis because the Torah of Bereshis, of Beis, is the Torah of Bria, of creation. And there's a higher level of Torah, which is the Torah of Aleph, the Torah of Atzilus, which starts with an Aleph. The Torah of Atzilus is the Torah of the transcendence. So what we have, Kaviyachol, is already the Torah that's the remez b'tachtonim. That's the illusion of the below. But the essence of the Torah, the etzem Torah, is b'elyonim, is higher. Yeah. Then the Rebbe continues like this over there. It's not that pshat means a kosev yagid d'alteinu v'yimas v'yonim. Not pshat is that it doesn't mean what the Ramban writes apparently. That a kosev, what the Ramban actually writes, but apparently it means a kosev yagid d'alteinu v'yimas v'yonim. The kosev is really talking about below and alluding to below, to above. Now, the opposite. Torah Torah is actually speaking about the above, how these things exist within the spiritual realm. And they're only meramas tachtoinim, how they exist within the physical realm. Then the Rebbe continues. Avad, certainly, certainly the possibility cannot be taken stripped away, stripped from its simple interpretation. And you cannot say that the pasuk is only to the psukim of the Torah are only talking about a ruchnistic union. And the tziyun is to shal shun saraj b'chelik aleph. With the Rajba over there, it's not the Rajba himself, but it's as long as Snatzis to the Rajba. There was that period of time after the Rambam after the Rambam wrote the Moira, there were many groups of Yidden that became tremendous scholars of the Rambam, and they at some point they started certain people started interpreting the Torah allegorically. And the whole Torah is analogies. It's an allegorical tale. It's a remez. So you're learning, for example, which incidentally the Dr. the Zohar Kodesh writes is that Avram, that says that Sarah passed away in Kiryas Arba in Hebron. That Sarah represents the Guf, Avram represents the Neshama, and the Kiryas Arba represents the four elements. Hebron represents the Chibur, the four elements. The Sarah, the body returns back to the four elements. This was the type of interpretation that was going on. So they were stripping Psukei Torah, the Torah, from its literal pshat and saying it's all a remazim. It's all just remez. And then there was a ban because of this. There was a ban on general, and the Rashba signed the ban against learning philosophy because you have to read the psukim, you have to read the kipshuta. That the Avram means Avram. It was Avram. Sarah means Sarah. There was a person called Avram. There was a person called Sarah. They were living people. They lived at a certain period of time. They passed away. This is real people. I was like, they're real people, but they're real people. In this understanding of the realness of the physicality, you should also understand. So first of all, that it's clear that it's the Yutun. However, the essence of the Torah, the medaber is etzem bel yonim v'remedes b'tachtonim. It's talking about above and it's talking about and alluding to below. But the Ramban writes the opposite. It's talking about the below and alluding to the above. On that, the Rebbe writes, this is the Lashon Ramban. That it's possible to say that the Ramban is actually not arguing. That what the Ramban says, that the Torah is talking about the above and alluding to in the below, or the Ramban says the Torah is talking about the below and alluding to the above, it's not an argument. The Rebbe doesn't actually marach on this explanation. He says that it's not a machlokes. It's actually not. It's not an argument. They're saying the same thing. What's Rav is saying the same thing. I think this is the nekuda of this sikha and a lot of the Rebbe sikhas. That there's an understanding. There's two ways to understand this. You can say things exist in a spiritual realm, and then it devolves from a spiritual realm into a physical realm, and the physicality of something, the physical world in general. We say that the Torah is a roshim of the kus, the Shalach Kadosh writes, and the world is a roshim of the Torah, imprint of the Torah. So there's like the essence of the thing, its purity, which is the ruchnistic level, the spiritual level, and then it devolves into a place where it becomes the physical level. That's one way of understanding it. The deeper understanding is, and what's revealed in Torah Chassidus, and Alter writes this in Tanya, and later in the Geras HaKodesh, that with greater arichis, that there's a concept of no's tchilasim soifim v'soifim tchilasim, that the beginning is wedged in the end and the end in the beginning. It means there's the seder ishtalshlus, which is the evolvement of creation from one spiritual realm to the other spiritual realm. And in the evolvement of one spiritual realm to the other spiritual realm, the elo is always higher than the olo. The cause is always higher than the effect. So Bria is higher than Yitzir, and Atil is higher than Bria. That's within the spiritual realm, within the great chain of being, if you wish. But mitzad koyach atzmius, that the gashmis of this world, the physicality of the world, which seems to be the lowest rung, is in fact tied to the beginning. Just like atzmus ein soif, kaviyachol, the essence of the Creator, if we can talk about this, is in essence mitzuyosei matzmosei. He creates itself, means its existence just is. It has no prior existence, of course. If there's a prior existence, then that itself would be the atzmus ein soif. The same thing also in this world. The world labors, the physical world labors in the illusion that it creates itself. Why does it labor in this illusion that it creates itself? Because it comes from the koyach atzmos. That in Gashmis, the physicality is actually rooted in the atzmos. The atzmos is reflected in the davar Gashmi, in the physicality. Since atzmos is an atzmostic thing, is an essence thing, it can't be revealed in the place of Gilui, in the place of revelation. In the place where there's a revealing of Hashem's presence, a revealing of Hashem's light, that's not the essence of the creator. It's a light that's being created, that's being revealed. So there's a higher light, a lower light, and a more diminished light, but it's not the essence. The essence is beyond the light. And therefore, the essence is revealed in the essence of creation, of physicality, which doesn't have the light, apparently. It doesn't reveal that light as much as, or it appears to be that it's obscuring that light. So this is the Chiddush in Torah Chassidus in general. and specifically, more so in the Rebbe's Torah, in Likutei Sichos especially, and in the Maimorim, that if you really want to be makashi yourself with the Atzmi saying so, if you want to really connect with the Atzmi so, it's actually dafka in the Gashmi. It's specifically in the Davar Gashmi, in the physical thing, because the physical thing is the notes, the chilas and the soif and soif and the edge is when the beginning and the wedge in the end. That's where the atzmis of the thing is expressed, the essence of the thing, and the essence of physicality. So now let's understand what the Rebbe said, and these two understanding. If the Torah is talking about the Yonim, the Torah is really talking about above and only alluding to below, or the Torah is actually talking about the below and only alluding to the above. And the answer is, mamash, the answer is that they're both simultaneously true and they're not contradictory to each other. It depends on which perspective you're talking from. When you're talking from the perspective of the above, it seems like the above is its essence, and that's the below is only the reflection. But you're talking from the perspective of the below, it seems that the below is the essence, and the above is only the reflection. Because in truth, the essence of the above is one and creates the essence of the below. In simple language, in terms of the way we understand the term. Dafka, there's pshat runners durch soid, and then there's the yichida, or level what the Emek Kabbalah calls the neshama of neshama, which is the soid shabasoid, which is chassidus, which is the fifth madrega. And the fifth madrega, which is the highest madrega, includes all the four. But where is the fifth madrega revealed even stronger? Where's the highest revealed dafka in the lowest? So in order for us to really understand the highest level of soy, the highest level of the secret, of the open secret, the secret that there is no secret, the highest level of Torah Chassidus, the highest level is dafka by understanding the pshat. The more we understand the pshat, the more we can understand the soy. The more we understand the soy, the more we can understand the pshat. So it's a chativa achas. Not only is a chativa achas, but in order for us to get to the essence of something, to the essence of what's really going on, we have to dafka learn pshuta shamikra, and a strong emphasis on pshuta shamikra. And that's why there was such a strong emphasis on pshuta shamikra, on the literal interpretation of pshat, because dafka in the pshuta shamikra, if we really understand the omek pshat, we can actually understand the omek hasoid, the deepest secret, because the notes chlas and the soif and soif and and it's interesting that this structure is revealed in every single Torah. But particularly when we're learning partially the case, we're learning about Yoseph to understand that Yoseph, the person, the more we understand about Yoseph, the person, physically who Yoseph was as a person that was always a unifier, the one that was able to get the brothers to get together, the one that was able to get his father to get together with his brothers and with him, the one that was able to unify all of Mitzrayim in the years of plenty and the years of famine, the one that was able to make a chibur, the one that was able to make, he said, because he comes to the Olam Yigulim, because he comes to the world of this place of Yichud, we see this reflected and we're embodied in his physical life, and because we understand that how it's embodied in his physical life, we understand it deeply how it works on the pshat level. We can understand how it works on the soid level, because that's where the shoyesh and the shama, the source of Yosef the shama comes from. And the more we understand the shoyesh of Yosef the shama, it comes from Yigulim, the more we can understand the pshat level of what actually happens in the story of Yosef and how Yosef becomes the great savior of Mitzrayim and eventually of the children of Yaakov.